YouTube, vinyl community, Beatles fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to do a review of the Beatles album Live at the Hollywood Bowl, 8 days a week soundtrack, the Ron Howard film documentary. This album has taken a long time to come out on CD and now reissued vinyl. This is just a great, cool album. I mean, it covers the height of Beatlemania. So here we go. Here's some history. In the 60s, you see, when the Beatles were a band, they were one of the only groups that didn't put out a live album. The Stones did it, the Kinks did it, the Beach Boys did it. A lot of people were doing it. It was a big thing to have that experience captured on record for fans to listen to at home who couldn't get to the show or who wanted to relive the magic of the show. What happened was, in 1964, the Capitol Records wanted to record the Beatles at Carnegie Hall, but they couldn't do it. There was like a union law that prevented them from recording it. Legal stuff got in the way. It couldn't happen. When their show got secured for the Hollywood Bowl in August of that year, yes, that was able to be recorded. But upon hearing the tapes, Capitol wasn't really feeling it. They thought it just didn't sound too good. They tried again a year later at the same Hollywood Bowl, and again, mixed results, kind of feeling iffy on it. Also for the fact that it's a half hour of screaming with the Beatles in the background somewhere. The tapes just weren't good. So, I mean, that was a giant missed opportunity on Capitol's part, and I guess it would have been released in England too, but just because they were in America, Capitol was in charge of recording it. So, giant loss of cash on their end, because that would have been a humongous seller. The only thing that escaped from those tapes were a bit of Twist and Shout that was used for the Beatles Story album in 1964. Anyways, fast forward a little while, up until about 1971, Phil Spector was given the tapes and said, hey, can you do something with this? And nothing happened from it. The sources say either he couldn't figure out what to do with it, sources say he gave up on it or just didn't care. Varying sources are varying. A couple years later after that, George Martin was given the task of putting something together, and he did. He got Jeff Emmerich back, who was the engineer for a lot of the Beatles albums, starting with Revolver, and they worked really hard getting the tapes from their original 3-track recording transferred onto a 16-track, which was like the big thing at the time, just modern technology. While they were doing that, the tapes and the machines were overheating, and they had to blow cold air over these things to make sure it didn't fall apart or decay or bust into flames. And what they did was they spent months equalizing everything, upping and lowering volumes and registers, trying to get the Beatles to sound like they were there, and trying to mix down the girls screaming so it sounded like an album. What they came up with, we'll stretch it over here, was this. The Beatles live at the Hollywood Bowl. And what happened was George Martin condensed the two shows from August of 64 and August of 65. I know that doesn't sound right. The show's from 64 and the show's from 65. Let's put it that way. We're not going to be too perfect here, right? He took those two shows, and Capitol was expecting like a big double album. And George Martin was, there's a great book called Fab 4 FAQ 2.0, which focuses on like the solo stuff in the 70s, 1970, 1980. And the author, Robert Rodriguez, says that, George Martin was a single album kind of guy. And that's true. I mean, he wanted the White Album to be one album. So instead of making this a big so-so double album, he made it one pretty decent solo disc album. And kind of came up with his own track listing, Twist and Shout, She's a Woman, this 1-2 punch that just kicks ass. It's really good. And that was it. Like, it never came out on CD after that. It came out on tape, which I have somewhere. I should have grabbed that for the review. But it came out on tape, it came out on vinyl, and that was the end of that. So when this documentary started to get in the works that Ron Howard was going to do an album just on the touring years of the Beatles, word kind of spread like wildfire, like that this was finally going to get released again on CD. Giles Martin, George Martin's son, was in charge of this project, and he did a fantastic job remixing this thing. with a technique and a technology called demix or demix. I'm not really sure how you pronounce it, but you basically demix a single track, and you take that single track and you're able to split it apart, basically creating like a stereo where you can take the various parts of the track and separate them, so you can separate the audience and separate the Beatles, and then actually focus on the Beatles instruments and raise things, lower things, clear things up, make things sound more round. And he did a fantastic, fantastic job. I mean, I got it on in the background here, and you can hear the bass, you can hear the drums, you can hear the crispness of the guitars. Giles did a fantastic, fantastic job. Hats off to you, sir. As an album, I mean, it's the Beatles live. You know, it's an experience that very few of us have, got to experience unless you were there for those few short years that they were doing it. It's just a fantastic set. Height of Beatlemania. You got I'm Doing Twist and Shout, Dizzy Miss Lizzy, Ticket to Ride, Can't Buy Me Love, Help, A Hard Day's Night, Boys. I mean, they just do it all. This thing also features bonus tracks. So you got You Can't Do That, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, and Babies in Black, which was actually released as a B-side on the Real Love single in 1996. So here's the inside of the album, which just says the liner notes. And then the actual record itself. I love these shots. These shots are great. And I'll show you the actual label. Just a simple blue label. A lot of people were complaining that it should have been just re-released as it was, with the same old cover and not with such a heavy focus on promoting the movie at the same time. But I don't know. I think it's cool. I think it's a good shot of them. I think the cover's attractive and it sticks out as big giant Beatles. I mean, if you see it on the shelf, you're like, that's the Beatles. And it says Live at the Hollywood Bowl on top anyway, so you're getting the album. Yeah. For me, this is pretty fun. Watching the movie was a fantastic experience. I went to the theater a couple times to see it, and it was just great to see them talking about those days, and a lot of those times had really good memories associated with it, until you get to the end, where it just became a giant drag for them. But, that's for the movie. It's a whole different review. But the album as a whole, it's an experience, because you really do feel like you're there. You get the energy that they have, that they're just trying to plug through this half hour of music, this bundle of nerves that they are. But standout tracks for sure are Things We Said Today. That bridge section just kicks into high gear, and they just take on like this whole other version of the song as life comes out of it. Ringo doing Boys, they're on fire with that song. Long Tall Sally, you can't go wrong with that. The opener, Twist and Shout, that's a Beatles classic. It's basically a greatest hits album, and that's okay. If I had to give it a review, I am reviewing it, silly. If I gave it a number review, like a rating, I would probably give this maybe a 9 or 10 out of 10. I'm a sucker for the Beatles. They're my favorite band. One of my favorite bands. Anything that comes out with the Beatles on it, I jump on it. I eat this stuff up. And even though it's stuff we've already had before, it's amazing to hear it so clear and remixed so well. They did such a fantastic job. That's one thing I'll give the Beatles credit for these days, is whenever a reissue comes out, they put the utmost care into making sure it's something that's going to last a long time. They've already reissued the Love album, I think, and that was only 10 years ago. So, whenever new technology comes out, they try to just do better and better with it. I remember seeing a thing with Ringo years ago where he was like, old papers get yellow and crinkly and fall apart, but our music keeps getting brighter and brighter. Yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. I can't recommend this enough. If you're a Beatles fan, check it out. If you've checked it out, what do you think of it? Let me know. I think it's a fun experience. I don't know, you know what? 10 out of 10. It's the Beatles. 8 days a week, live at the Hollywood Bowl. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Thanks. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews. Signing off.